Which I think perhaps is a useful test in its own right. I mean, it's good to keep those numbers as we go along, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, well, what's his name? Stefano from Citrix has already done this to some extent, right? Because he had those slides on.
Okay.
It'd definitely be a faster and quicker deployment to not involve OpenStack for testing purposes.
I mean, the other thing I think needs to be done for OpenStack is like more configurations, like particularly Neutron. Like it would be good to test more configurations of OpenStack.
In terms of pulling in different types of component.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, I'm not sure if I just want to say more or just we should do Neutron. I mean, there are other OpenStack components, you know, the outer ones, and I think, I don't know, in the absence of specific requests from members, I think we should try not do them for now, like Ceilometer, Heat, Sahara, that kind of thing. We've got enough to be going on with.
So was there any discussion on the storage side? I mean, SpecJB, from the little I understand of it, is kind of CPU bound in places.
There was, but it wasn't very productive.
Sorry, it wasn't?
There was discussion, but it wasn't especially productive discussion. I think on the storage side, the focus is still on the lower layers, basically. So it's Steve Kappa looking at file system performance. And then, like, there's a proposal to look at Ceph, but people weren't enthusiastic about doing that until the lower levels have been improved.
Is there really any architecture-specific stuff in the storage layer?
You mean in Ceph? Or which storage layer?
I mean, the OpenStack storage.
No.
So there should be no issues in that front.
It's functionality, certainly not. Performance, maybe. I mean, because it was one of the way before the ARM server market disappeared. It was one of the things that people were seriously looking at was like running Ceph and things like that on high bank and so on. So it would still make sense for ARM servers, presumably.
But also we have to highlight that we haven't really tried storage deployments yet.
Yeah.
We just made sure that some of the components work, they don't fall over, but we haven't really tested in a realistic environment.
So some of that's been hardware bound.
Yeah.
Not having appropriate hardware to test it with.
And also, I mean, you can't test Cinder in an ARM64 only deployment because we don't have the whole PCI thing.
So I mean, a question about the SpecJBB scale out or testing. Are those numbers then that we can actually publish? I mean, I'm just wondering how we aggregate these and where do they go?
Yeah, I don't know. I presume not. I don't know. I mean, yeah, and whether we have to do the same thing of fixing a baseline and then just tracking how we change relative to that, I don't know. I mean, once stuff ships, of course, then these numbers become a little bit less sensitive.
Is it possible to have relative performance shown there? So basic on you define a baseline, and based on that you can see where the code takes you.
I mean, if we're using Java, I guess we could use the zero interpreter.
Zero interpreter on one node, on bare metal, on trusty,
Yeah.
as of 1st of September or whatever.
But I don't know. I mean, I think we looked at this in the past, and I mean, I don't think the SpecJBB test would complete with zero
Well, maybe
anytime soon.
Pick an OpenJDK snapshot, a snapshot, and use that as your baseline.
Yeah, I think we could do what we did with what we're already doing with some of the tests and use the 1st of April as a bench line.
Okay.
Yeah. So relative performance improvement since then.
And also you can compare the scenarios like bare metal versus virtualized versus multi-node things.
The ARM developer cluster that's being proposed in Cambridge, is that currently you're going to be running OpenStack, or what's it using today for
Well, it doesn't exist yet, right? It will be using OpenStack, I believe. Where's Andy gone? Ask him that question.
I guess the answer is that it hasn't been decided yet, but OpenStack is the likely candidate. So I have a question. This 3-node setup, has it been documented somehow how it was done? It's, for example, I get 3 nodes for myself that I could replicate the setup.
No, but it's something I need to do, I think.
I think, so I have a Lava job that, that installs OpenStack on a single node. And so that's kind of, you can follow through all the steps.
Okay.
And you can replicate that yourself. But I think that's what you started from that.
I cargo cultured directly from your scripts.
So yeah, so it's not exactly documented, but it's available how to do it on.
So I
single
can go
node.
to the Lava and check what jobs you submitted to the
And
Mustangs.
then find the
find
GitHub
it.
repositories, and yes. So, I mean, I can show you there where they all are. Almost all my trees on git.linaro.org is to do with this. So.
But I guess it is an action that I'm taking for Andrew to set up a wiki on Mustang and Clark to set up something on Shot.
Yeah, I've got plans to document everything on the wiki, what I did for Moonshot. I've got to share it internally in HP first.
Of course, particularly for Moonshot, it will be nice. Everything will hopefully get much easier once Mass 1.6 is released and things are a bit more nailed down.
Speaking of that, I mean, do you know on the Mustangs, the 1U versions, whether they support the BMC or?
I don't think they have a BMC. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't think so. I can ask.
What was the acronym?
BMC, out-of-band power management.
I guess the other question is related to dogfooding this whole experience. We did show that it's possible to run Jenkins builds. Would there be interest from builds line or Lava side to try and reuse that to a certain extent?
Yes,
a meeting about this on Monday.
Yes, we had a meeting and it's definitely on our plans.
I think I wasn't able to attend the meeting, but my question again is hardware. Where did the hardware that we run this on come from?
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of asking this is hardware is irrelevant without workloads. So, and in terms of definition of the workloads, it can be a little bit difficult to extract from members. So we have to define our own.
We are using EC2 workloads and with the EC2 machines we have are not very fast, so it should be very comparable to any kind of APM machine.
Yeah.
And if it isn't, we have all the people in our organization to find the reasons why it's slow.
Yeah, indeed. What were the first services that were being proposed to move?
Jenkins slaves.
Okay. That makes sense.
So I know we touched on it on Monday, I think, but you know, there's the issue I found was the copy artifact plugin. I mean, if you're dependent on that, it always disconnects the slave from the master. Which I suspect is a problem with libjni dispatch not being present, at a rough guess.
Well, we'll find out if we have the problem and we'll have to fix it.
So were there any other scale-out topics discussed?
I guess we can, if you want, we can look a little bit into details, like, for example, when do we expect these next steps to be taken so that we can prepare a little bit? Do you have an idea, for example, from builds when you would have time to start looking into this?
So I believe that we will start containerizing our services so that they can be moved from one platform to another easily. but the actual testing on new hardware affects, again, a dependency on Andy. So,
But the intention is to use Docker on the slave as well.
well, let's see what is actually going to be there. But Docker images at least to create the reproducible setup. It could be that we just run the Docker containers inside a KVM or Xen machine, or however we do it. It will depend what is the most convenient way to use it on OpenStack.
Now that you mentioned Zen, what is the outcome on Zen running for Moonshot? Maybe for people who haven't seen it.
It runs. It's got some performance issues because we had to disable a few things to get it to start properly. So it's still a work in progress, but it is running. So now we can proceed with trying to layer all the OpenStack layers on top of it and see if it can be used in place of KVM, where we know we have some KVM limitations at the moment. So.
Do we have? Does it work on Mustang as well, or only Moonshot at the moment?
It's supposed to work better on Mustang at the moment.
So we have CI loops testing Xen on Mustang, and it
Okay.
works very well. I believe the fancy benchmarks that Stefano was showing about KVM being beaten hardly by Xen was especially on Mustang.
So, like, would it be it ought to be possible then to have a version of my Lava? I don't think. Can we test this and we do the OpenStack tests in Lava? It's basically OpenStack on Zen testing in Lava, like where I run like the jobs where I run Tempest.
We haven't yet, but we should.
Those are charms deployed. I don't know, let's talk about it.
That's the trick, is to figure out the configuration to get it to work. So
Yeah.
never have tried it.
Yeah, no. Otherwise, does DevStack support Zen?
It's supposed to.
So did I understand correctly, did you mention that we can start doing some level of performance checking using Zen as a backend of OpenStack?
It would depend on what platform you're wanting to do it on.
I think saying you shouldn't really do it on Moonshot today.
Yes, not on Moonshot today. It's a work in progress
It's known that performance is bad.
to get it working properly, but we can at least
Enable the jobs.
we can start doing testing with OpenStack using Zen as a backend. Hopefully it won't have the issues related to hot adding storage that we've got with KVM. So we may be able to proceed further using Zen as a backend at the moment. But we should definitely be able to do it on Mustang.
Sorry?
We should definitely be able to do it on the Mustang equipment that we've got.
Okay. Things you guys want to raise?
Well, I mean, just again, I mean, any other scale-out type work that we could look at? And some of the things that we do here, perhaps, I mean, maybe it's not true for all of them, but some of them perhaps run under the guise of unit testing. Is there anything we can do about stress testing?
Well, so I mean, there was the talk of using Rally, of course, and doing benchmarking of OpenStack, of the OpenStack provisioning process.
One thing that you have to remember is that Rally is a framework. It doesn't give you the benchmarks.
Well,
it gives you the tools to run the benchmarks.
There are some obvious, so we need to think about what benchmarks we want to run. I mean, there's obvious things like boosting as many VMs as possible as quickly as possible, right? That seems like it would be the one you'd start with, probably. I mean, one of the things Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it would be interesting to do things like heat auto-scaling, but it just seems to me to be a bit much of a stretch at this point.
Which one?
Like your auto-scaling type stuff would be be very interesting to do, but I don't know if it's actually important, you know, whether it's likely to reveal anything interesting beyond being a cool demo.
Well, as you go higher up the stack, we're not finding platform-specific issues with anything.
You hope.
Yeah,
so these become much less likely.
So, are we?
Is there any point?
Are we trying that just for the sake of trying it, or are we actually expecting to find any kind of
I agree
architectural issues?
No.
I agree that for testing things, we should be looking at things that have differences between x86. Like we know that KVM has different command line on x86 and ARM, and we should look at the higher up stacks where they have dependencies on command line. Or I guess libvirt should try to insulate this all, but it might not do so.
It doesn't do it completely.
You know.
Yes.
Yes, it does not.
And there's another round of changes now that we have a bootloader for ARM64 KVM. We need to figure out how to invoke it properly, from whether that requires Nova or it will require changes. It will require Nova changes, but it requires libvirt changes as well. I just don't know. So Drew is just left. He's also working on that. So.
Would it make sense to repeat known experiments like set up a deployment of OpenStack and try to see how many VMs you can bring up?
I think that would be quite interesting.
Like choose the flavor, minimum small flavor, and try to launch as many possible VMs. Just launch, maybe do a basic check to keep them alive for a while, and then shut them down.
I think that would be quite interesting.
And perhaps it becomes a little bit more interesting once you've got more NICs enabled.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true.
So,
and
I mean, the numbers might not be as great as you'd imagine, but if you had the network, different network setup, so that you're pulling from different machines to the images.
I think, I mean, this, like, Canonical have done these tests on these C micro chassis where you end up bottlenecking on Rabbit, basically.
Sorry?
On Rabbit, the message bus.
Right.
But we won't have enough hardware to do that, so
right.
It would be quite interesting to, and people in the steering committee will talk about this as well, like just slam as many VMs on a physical host as possible and see where it starts to fall apart. I guess for lots of these things you want to do stuff on Intel as well, because just to see if it's different, right? Like have a NUC or something and running.
Yeah,
do the same test.
That's the trouble, isn't it? You might actually make a claim that it's not working on ARM, but it actually may also be true on Intel.
So. Like particularly, like running Tempest. If we're going to run Tempest on Zen on ARM, we should definitely run Tempest on Zen on Intel as well, because it's not a supported platform in the same way. So we don't know if it may well have failures upstream.
Right.
And in fact, well, when I run Tempest on Intel on KVM, I see failures, and that's clearly. So we need to find out how upstream are doing it. Which I want to get you to talk to people about, I guess.
So what is Tempest?
It's the OpenStack test suite, so integration tests, like it's sort of
API testing.
API testing. It's an OpenStack client, uses the client interfaces.
Right.
So basically we want to know whether the components are set up, they talk to each other properly, you run the Tempest tests to figure it out. And they are used as gating tests as well for release purposes.
Right.
Should we be looking at anything exotic?
Well, that's the question.
Like Ticket Monster has been brought up in the past.
Yeah. And that's why I keep asking the question about, I mean, is there some kind of real world example that we can run as opposed to, I mean, how real world is SpecJBB? I don't know.
I mean, if you look at it this way, SpecJBB is not a real world example. It just provides the necessary confidence level, I'd say, that the lower levels work as they are supposed to work.
So in some ways it comes back to it's a unit test rather than a real world test or a stress test. So I guess my concern is in the real world, people are not running spec JBB, so would it be better for us to focus on something else as well, perhaps? And then the question becomes, what is that, and how easy is it for us to run that on a small set of boards? I'm not saying that we shouldn't run spec JBB, but I think perhaps there are maybe other things we should look at along the way.
Yeah, I think that spec JBB itself is something that we want to look into until OpenStack Summit. Maybe provide a quick answer and set up to try and have some answers for whoever is interested, steering committee or other. But yeah, we need to think about the next steps in terms of something more realistic. Even though the results from Tempest and spec JBB will be pacifying enough for anybody who's worried about performance, perhaps. I'm not saying that it will, but hopefully it will. We need also to think of digging into in a little bit different way. I mean, the main point that has been raised is how certain are we that all the necessary components work properly. The argument has been brought by some folks at the steering committee level is that yes, it builds, yes, it runs. Do we know if it runs well? And that's the answer that we want to try and gauge out of this. But obviously, we need to go step by step, ensure that the lower levels are tested enough, and we are certain that they work as well as they can on RB8, and then move on from there. So it's work in progress.
Yeah, I mean certainly baby steps, but I think we should have always have perhaps a little bit of a bigger picture in mind in terms of real world testing.
Okay. Any other points from anyone? Questions? Andy, are you happy? I mean, do you expect that people will be, yes, it works if we run OpenStack on the development cloud, or?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. This is the first round of deployment of this I've ever done, so it's I can't really predict what it's going to look like.
Okay.
I mean, we start Monday, it's driving down to Austin, and start plugging everything in, and these guys have demonstrated how I can get OpenStack.
And we see after that, right?
Do you have everything you need to get started deployment, or is there documentation or scripts or things you need from us?
Well, I'm going to look at Michael's model stuff to figure out some stuff on OpenStack. The first thing that we need is just a bare metal deployment. I've sorted out the models. I've fixed a few things, but I can get that to where we can at least, so, it's going to be half and half. Half of it's canonical speed of the cloud, the other half will be Red Hat speed of the world. So sorted out the canonical half.
And I'm sure you can contact us, any of us, for any issues you have. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been able to get help from, I know the Moss guys, and I'm in contact with the APM guys for a reboot problem I found with my board. And, yeah, there's no blockers, it's just time.
I'm only a couple hours away from getting anything.
Yeah. Hopefully, I don't want to drag too many people. I want to get to it as soon as possible where I don't have to be there. So that's my driving motivation.
Okay, the last thing I wanted to ask is about upgrading the OpenStack platform, framework, operating system, whatever you want to call it, has a semi-annual release cycle. Do you expect that we will be upgrading when Juno comes up? The OpenStack Juno?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Those kind of things, it's going to be when people request, that card comes in. That's what we'll do.
Okay.
I mean, do we have a... Well, I mean, it's something we should think about because we will want to upgrade to, for example, supporting bootloaders rather than directly booting the kernel. And so how that's going to require a new host kernel. How do we go about that, do you suppose? I mean, we do need to think about how we're going to do upgrades of the service, I would say. And I guess, and also, I mean, I haven't been through any of the sessions where it's sort of been talked about in public, but presumably, like, we're not guaranteeing an SLA or anything like that, right? So if it goes down, it is going to be possible to just take everything down, reinstall, bring it back up in a few months if that's what we have to do.
One big thing with Slab is like these systems aren't like nothing's permanent. You get something for X amount of time. Yeah. When that time is over, you just wipe it and move on.
Don't start running services, long-running services.
In terms of Juno, do you know if that's backported into Trusty?
Yeah, Juno will be supported on Trusty.
Yeah.
But not for very long. This is the thing. Like, if you want to, like, Icehouse will be supported for the life of Trusty, but Juno will probably only be supported until Caves.
So, do you have plans for moving the base operating system beyond Trusty, or is it just going to be?
Well, I mean, part of this, we're going to have a mix because, like, say, some people want bare metal access to the machine, which we're going to. So Wookie wants some. He wants a Debian setup to do some .64 packages. So he's got a bare metal. He just some people want OpenStack.
It's kind of, we need to listen what people ask for, but then give them what they actually need, and not what it's not necessarily the same thing what they ask for. So when Wookie says that he needs a machine to build Debian packages on, it could just be a virtual machine in OpenStack. There's no specific need for it to be a raw machine.
I kind of see what you're saying, but if we do something that's not fast enough to solve this problem.
So the Wookie requirement, does that come direct from Wookie?
Yeah, he's okay at this time. He said he could do it from.
Who did he ask? Did he ask you?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you then go to George and ask him?
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking
he had talked to, yeah.
Well, the reason I'm asking that is that I went into George with Steve McIntyre yesterday lunchtime and got George to commit 3 APM machines in the Austin Colo to the Debian project.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it came from Steve McIntyre.
Yeah,
I'm a little scared that if we end up committing physical machines to people, very soon we'll actually only be running OpenStack on one node.
Yes.
Right? What are the numbers? How many nodes is it going to be? 20?
Well, it's 40.
40, so it's going to be 20 on the Debian side. Yeah. The dev side, or app side, whatever you call it. So hopefully most of them can be used as compute nodes.
But Ricky's right. I mean, given that what they need it for is native builds of the V8, it doesn't matter, does it?
I mean, you will get better performance with that, but not much, like 10%.
Yeah. But if your build is 2 days, does 10% matter?
No, quite. And if the alternative is 6 weeks in a foundation model.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other points or questions from you?
guess the time is getting finished as well.
Yeah, I guess.
10 minutes.
Yeah, I guess we can actually finish early. If there are no other questions.
Guess it's to the coffee queue.
Thank you very much. I've taken some comments in the Eatherpad, which you will find from the Zarista page. So if you remember something, if you do remember something else after the session, then you can find out the. You can find out from the Zarista page. If you go to agenda sessions and then look into Friday's session, you will find the session there. And from there you can see the material plus the Eatherpad, which I've tried to take some notes into. So if you remember something or if you have any further points that you want to clarify, please refer to that, let us know. Okay? Thank you very much.